illustrator is right. Horror is functionally a rebuttable genre. Great horror movies are a fluke. Most new filmmakers making horror do it cynically because it's the easiest genre to get produced without needing a good cast. It's a tragedy when great filmmakers get trapped. Oh, there are more bad horror movies than any other genre. It's the trenches where bad filmmakers go to exercise their entitlement to make a movie, and where good filmmakers are forced to start, and likely to remain, I might add, because of industry forces. Oh. Longlegs. Again, the same question. I met Elvis and Osgood Perkins when I lived in LA and played charades with the parents. I adore Tony and Barry Berenson. Osgood is clearly a talented director. But like T-West is confined by the horror genre ghetto. What is it about independent film that talented young filmmakers can only find financing and distribution in horror genre? It's beneath seriousness. Western gangster films, spy theaters, and other genres can be remolded and exploited to convey serious issues and conundrums. Horror films seems to me the most resistant to this upgrade. For the most part, the raison d'etre is horror itself.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a very special episode of Renegade Marquee on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host this evening. Joining me for the first time in a long time, we've got Millennial Mike.
Hey, good to hear from you again. I had so much fun last time. I took a little Twitter reprieve, so that's why you haven't seen from me. But I'm happy to be back and exhaust my social battery and then do it again, you know?
Glad to have you back. And making their Renegade Pop Culture debut, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Josh Harding.
Hi, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate the invite. You're really good at your introduction. I just started a podcast not too long ago, and me and my co-host are still trying to nail that down. But so good job, Mike. But thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Of course. And yes, thank you for that compliment, because this is going to be kind of an interesting discussion. I have no idea where the conversation is going to go, but largely what we're doing is we're just kind of going to go over the state of modern film discourse. That sounds like a very vague description, but that just leaves more room for addressing all sorts of things.
Discourse about the discourse.
But first, Josh, since this is your first time on the podcast, why don't you, introduce yourself to the audience and how you got into the online film space?
Oh, God. I don't even know if I'm officially in the online film space, but I mean, we know each other through Twitter. Where do we even begin? Like, I've been off and on various apps. I was in the film discourse space when I was in college. I mean, even like late high school when I was 18, 19. I went to school at UCLA. I was taking classes at the film school there, so I was really coming into my own as like a full-fledged cinephile around that time. So I initially was in the comment section on websites that are used to exist and no longer do, like Birth, Movies, Death, formerly known as Badass Digest. Yeah, just getting my daily intake of film-related news and discussion from places like that. And then once, as time went on, I want to say probably once the pandemic started is when I fully leaned into like using Twitter as a space to talk about movie-related topics. And it's definitely been educational. It's been very informative. I feel like I've gone on a journey, which I really appreciate in terms of like coming into my own, so to speak, around my perspective, my opinions, my thoughts and feelings around film, both historically and contemporary. And it's been fun so far. I mean, it's been frustrating as well. yeah, that's how I made it into the online film space. It's been just a brief synopsis of my journey. Other than that, like I'm very passionate about art in general. I know that's a very abstract, high level statement to make, but I work at an art museum, so I'm surrounded by it daily, and I give a lot of thought to how the museum is run, to how the art in our collection is being presented. And then when I'm not working, I'm thinking about movies. It's kind of been my passion for my entire life. So very passionate about that.
It's nice to have someone on board who actually takes the art part of entertainment seriously. And I don't know, that's just something very commendable that you don't really see that often in this space.
But that's also been a journey. That's been part of my journey. I don't think I was always like that. In fact, I think that has been something that I've like fully committed to within the last couple of years, I want to say. So, like I said, it's been educational, my experience, and beneficial ultimately, because it's helped me like hone in on focusing on that specifically.
And we'll get into that a little bit more later. But for now, just as a refresher, Mike, how long would you say you've been around the online film community, whatever that word means anymore?
Probably about 10 years.
Oh, nice.
I started probably, I started my podcast somewhere between, and you'll really get a sense of kind of what I'm all about when I start talking here. I started my podcast between somewhere between Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. We called it the Film Exiles, and it was mostly just to discuss this trend that we noticed in regards to the discourse online about Zack Snyder, Man of Steel, and other kind of pop cultural elements. And we soon realized that the people who kind of gathered around this podcast, because we had several people working on the podcast that would all co-host and kind of switch off, handing it back and forth. Mainly it was me and Manu, who's Mon United at Twitter, who started it. But there was a lot of people who were working together, and we all found that we had a lot of passion for film. So while it kind of started around that, we really kind of used that as a springboard to get into other things. And I actually found that personally, when I got into the online, I guess you call it film Twitter, film community discussions, that I had a lot of passion for movies in general. And I started getting into a lot more indie stuff, a lot more kind of obscure stuff, and not just the big budget things. And then we would be doing 2-3 podcasts a week. Sometimes I'd be going to the movie theater at least once a week, at a certain point in the podcast. Later, we rebranded to the Exiles Network, where we continued our podcast discussions. We branched out to anime as well. So I'm really, and I've always been passionate about anime and animation, probably even longer than I have about film specifically. I have my own hobby, writing novels and doing art. I've done several different kinds of art mediums, painting, sketching, calligraphy, things like that in my personal time. So I've always been a very artistic person, poetry. I've done a lot of that. So yeah, just kind of dabbled in everything, but it started more mainstream and then it kind of branched off from there, and then podcasting and whatnot.
You mentioned that you've been in this space for like 10 years. I would say that's probably about as long as I've been like taking myself, quote unquote, seriously as a film fan. It started on Facebook, where I was involved with, a lot of those, like the big YouTube channels like Schmoes Know with Christian and Mark Ellis, AMC Movie Talk, which turned into Collider, which branched off in all those different places. And then I just met up with other people on Twitter with similar interests. That kept going for, again, like pretty much the last decade. Most of my film interactions have been on Twitter, and occasionally joining other people's like podcasts and after shows. It wasn't until 2020 that Renegade Pop Culture formed, and from there, the rest is history. As far as like my taste in film, I'm someone who will be down for anything. I've noticed over the past like 5-10 years that animation has really been my bread and butter. This is like the medium where I feel the most knowledgeable, the most passionate, and can really see the art and the craft of how these stories are told. And not just Western animation, but anime and places from around the world. And one of the things I miss about the pandemic era of the first couple years of the 2020s was because everything was virtual. I got to participate in the Annecy Film Festival for 2 years, getting screeners for not all of the films, but like a pretty large selection of titles. So that kind of helped me get it more into the foreign side of animation. But yeah, as far as like other genres, I'm down with everything. I like my blockbusters, but I also like the smaller indies, the mid-budget movies. I'm someone who can enjoy pretty much everything, and I've even gotten made fun of that throughout my years in the various film spaces. But
tell us more.
No, but just to wrap up the introductions, I've been around the film space long enough that I've seen all of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I guess to rip off the Band-Aid with the catalyst of this podcast, Josh, do you want to?
Explain why that happened. Well, first of all, I want to say, Mike, I've seen you I have various film related YouTube channels on in the background, like when I'm cooking, when I'm cleaning, when I'm just unwinding from the end of the day. And I see you pop up in comments and stuff. The one that comes to the top of my head is FYC. During Oscar season, I just like having it on, but I always see you comment on it and they love you over there. So I know you're known and you're well liked from what I've seen, just in the dipping into various YouTube channels that I've done myself. So just wanted to mention that before I forget.
Of course.
So the impetus for this conversation. I mean, I was just so I've been looking forward to Horizon, which came out 2 weeks ago now, I think. We're recording this in early July. So yeah, it's been about 2 weeks now. And before going in, I know it premiered at Cannes and I saw the initial wave of reactions. Oh, actually, let me backtrack. I heard of this project years ago. And when I immediately heard of it, I'm like a 4-part giant Western epic saga, written, directed, starring Kevin Costner. I'm like, okay, I don't know if I'll like that or not. At the time, I wasn't really sure how I felt about Costner as a filmmaker. I liked him as an actor. I love Field of Dreams, The Untouchables, JFK. But anyway, just the ambition of the project itself really fascinated me and was something that I had in the back of my mind. Okay, when that comes out, I definitely want to give that a look. And so it premiered at Cannes earlier this year in May, I think. And I was eagerly awaiting the reactions. I knew when the embargo lifted and I wanted to see what people were saying. And the first initial reactions I saw were pretty positive. And then I saw the negative ones come in. I looked on Letterboxd. I don't have a Letterboxd account. I refuse to get one. I'm weird about that, but I will still go on the app and kind of creep and just see what people are saying. So I saw the initial reactions coming in and I saw, oh, I was so bored. Oh, I saw one critic on their phone and I'm like, okay, interesting. Maybe I won't like this movie after all. But as the release date got closer and closer, I was just looking through Rotten Tomatoes to see various critics, what they thought about it. As I will typically do that, I guess, for a movie I'm looking forward to or I'm at least interested in. And I saw a professional critic. I don't even remember their name. I'm not going to name them, but they write for a well-known publication, actually one of the largest ones out there. And just the little blurb that they had in their review was, I'm paraphrasing here, but it said that, Costner's grand vision, he's leaning into his worst instincts and it makes one long for the idea of studio notes to rein him in. And I just there was a visceral reaction within me that I was like, what? You're a professional critic. You wrote that. I just really, I don't know. I was very upset. And so I went on Twitter as one does. Keep in mind, I wasn't I have a very small following. I don't really have that many followers. And I usually use Twitter as it was meant to be used. It's kind of your own personal online diary. So I just screenshotted that blurb that pissed me off. And I just tweeted it out into the ether, thinking it would only, reach no one or my small amount of followers. And from there, I don't know, other people agreed with it. Maybe a lot of people disagreed with it because what I had said was something to the effect of, it's a trend that I noticed for a while now across the film space, whether you're a professional critic, you're a non-professional critic, or you're not a critic at all. There's this idea of sanding down an artist's intent and trying to make what they have to say more palatable, make it more compromised, I guess is the more vulgar word. And just this idea of like longing for studio notes to rein in Kevin Costner's vision. And keep in mind, I didn't even see the movie yet, so I could have hated it. Spoiler alert, I ended up really loving it. Like I haven't really stopped thinking about it since I saw it. But yeah, I tweeted the screenshot of that review, and I just said it's kind of funny how many professional critics are they can't even really hide how inherently anti-art they are. Like if you're writing something like makes you long for studio notes, I kind of feel like you're in the wrong profession. I may have said it a little more harshly than that, but and from there it kind of became a mini discourse, I guess, for that weekend, the opening weekend of that movie. The critic found it, called me a shooter for Costner. And that's the thing also, like whenever you're trying to make a general statement about art, when it comes to a filmmaker, people think you're like this crazy diehard fan who's in a cult. You come across this all the time with people like Snyder, but it's part of online discourse where people think that you have to be in a tribe and you have to, how dare you say something bad about this person, whatever. But it was the general idea and concept of the implication of sanding down someone's very distinct voice. And I feel like over the past year, meaning like since 2024 started, I've noticed more and more that there's this strong desire across the board from people to engage with art. One of my friends, he's on Twitter as well, Musa, he worded it very well in his review of Horizon. He said, or his reaction to it, he said, people typically, I'm paraphrasing him as well, but he said people are looking for the ease of their own consumption, which I think really puts it very nicely. It's like, and it's how executives think. I don't know. Sorry, I'm going off in lots of different directions here. Clearly, I'm very passionate about this, but I feel like a lot of people do have that executive brain poisoned by capitalism. They're conditioned to think that way, where anything that an artist does, whether it's good or bad, which is entirely subjective, we should all be striving to support an artist's vision, both the good and the bad and the in between. And the thing we don't even really know if it is good or bad, because that's the artist. That's their idiosyncratic personality, their emotions, their thoughts, their feelings, their experiences. And I just feel like that's being more and more undervalued, I guess. Maybe it always was, but I don't know. I feel like it's getting worse and worse. And yeah, it really pissed me off. So I just said something about it. And just one last thought to like wrap all that up. I've in talking about how an artist is idiosyncratic. What I mainly notice is people, how they engage with movies. They love to bring this really like regimented, logical framework to things that are not meant to be viewed that way or engaged with that way. It's supposed to be distinct and messy and unique and all these other different things, because that's what art is. Art is like an emotional expression of an individual or a group of individuals in the case of filmmaking most of the time. So bringing logic to something that's meant to be messy and emotional frustrates me.
We'll get back to that whole forcing logic into, I guess, an illogical form of expression such as art in a moment. But I kind of wanted to back up to what you were saying about the sort of anti-art mindset just based on that initial review blurb, and just kind of confess that whether I like to admit it or not, sometimes I will have that sort of studio exec mentality. But at the same time, I kind of use that mentality in the opposite direction, where I'm more in support of the artists and I want to see the things that I am personally into, the things that I love. I just want those things to be as popular and as beloved as like the usual mainstream stuff, like your comic book heroes and the Pixars and all of that.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry to interject again, but before I forget that, there's plenty of executives and producers who have that same mentality that you just mentioned. Like, I mean, one who comes to mind immediately, John Landau, who just passed away a couple of days ago, unfortunately. was someone who was very passionate about the projects he was working on. All of it, the Avatar films with James Cameron, he's been his producing partner for 30 years before he passed. So he was someone and was an executive at their production company, Lightstorm Entertainment. So I'm sure he approached movies with the thought of how can we capitalize on this? But I think it's been very apparent, especially in the outpouring of love and support. And I've been following him since I was a kid. I've known who this guy was. He was very creative partner's vision. He thought it was his job to facilitate and make that a reality, So not all executives are assholes, but it's.
Can I interject?
Yeah,
go ahead.
So I think that what's interesting here is that there's a perception that there is a dichotomy between art and product, commerce.
Uh-huh.
And that in light of recent events and trends, that the director will be at odds with the studio, which is to say, the studio executives. And in that conflict, the thing that is the best for the audience is one or the other. And the thing that my whole agenda for being here, and I think Josh's as well, is to say that the thing that most people seem to be in favor of is the studio. And the question is, why is that? Why is it that if an artist, and also let's also put it this way too, because I want to steel man the arguments that people have been making about movies are a group effort. Of course, the whole thing about the group effort argument, while that is true, so I do want to give them that. The thing is that I feel like it's really easy to kind of insert your own narratives when you fuzzy the lines and you blur the lines and say it's a group effort. Because what if we were all talking about man, I really want to see this movie because this writer, he's on so many great projects. Now, people don't do that, but let's just say they were doing that. But then the writer got studio noted, or, let's say this editor or this DP or something like that. I just love seeing this one guy do his thing. It seemed like the thing that people are advocating for are not the interconnectivity and the teamwork between the people on set making the magic happen. Their frustration, it comes from this sort of constricting force that comes from the studio, which isn't the people on the set. It's the people who have coercive power over them. And that is somehow good. They have to rein in their vision. Like Josh said that the one person did in their review that his worst instincts came to bear or something like that. It's okay, to say something like that, what is a director's worst instincts? It's how, and
they'll say indulgence. That's always the term I say. They're being too indulgent. Or if a director has too much leeway or creative influence, it's, to use James Cameron as another example, Avatar, The Way of Water. There's too many indulgent scenes of them just being in the water and, riding the animals. There's no plot. It's very plot focused. It's so weird.
That is the main issue. I think too many people, when they're watching, whether it's film or television, one thing I think they spend way too much time on is the plot. For a visual medium, I can't speak to anyone else, but speaking only for myself, the plot is it's not even in the top 5 of my criteria for what makes a good movie. Sure, some movies do have a great plot, but what I look for more in a visual medium is the aesthetics, the craft of the filmmaking, the performances of the actors, the sound design, the cinematography, editing, score, everything pretty much except for the plot. I'll even take story and themes over the plot because those can run deep and those can have more substantial discussions, whereas the plot is just a sequence of events.
You know what that is, though? To go back to my original point, I think the plot, it's logical, right? It makes sense. It's point A to point B to point C, all these different things, to the end of the movie. And I think it's that lack of emotional curiosity, investment, all the things pertaining to something that you feel when you watch a movie. I think people don't pay attention to what, as they do with every aspect of their life. They don't really like feelings. It's like, at least that's probably part of my thesis on what I think and feel, but about how people engage with movies. But I think plot, this focus on it, has come from the executive side. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, to add to your point, I've noticed this, that there's a heavy emphasis on plot and lore specifically, and continuity and all these kinds of things. Like you were saying, I like how you put the logic element to it, because basically what people want to be able to do is they're smart and they're diligent, but they aren't very intuitive. So what they want to do is they want to be able to watch something, to be able to mathematically and formulaically dissect something, so that way they can come up with like an algorithm, like they can say, okay, this person was wearing red in this scene and they weren't wearing red in this scene, or their, thingamajigger was, left in this scene and it was right in this scene, or, whatever. So that way they can use their correctness to say, I understand this film better than anyone else, and I can prove someone wrong. Like, what's the point if you can't say that someone else's opinion on something is not right or wrong?
They turn storytelling into puzzle pieces.
Yes.
That they want, that they need to connect.
I have friends like that as well. And it's very frustrating because it's like, there's so many different elements that you can talk about with a film, and they're more intuitive than they are mathematical. And it's like, some of my friends who really enjoy a lot of TV shows or movies, they like to watch movies as though they're mysteries that need to be pieced together. Like, oh man, I can't wait to see how this all comes together. It's like, not every film needs to come together necessarily. Like, you can just experience it as you're watching it. But a lot of my personal in real life friends, they don't do that. They're just kind of like there. And I guess that really speaks to kind of what the climate is right now.
Yeah, I got to be careful with how I phrase this next question, but you know what?
No, you don't.
You know what? Fuck it. Since it's coming towards the end of this month anyway, I might as well ask, how much do you think the MCU has negatively affected the way general audiences view film and television?
It's the number one. I wrote a whole essay on it. Yeah, it's there's a great article. I was actually looking for it. It's called like Avengers Endgame and the Apocalypse of Cinema or something like that. I need to find it. I think it was a Deadline article or something like that. And I'll find the article. I'll send it to you guys. But I read this article every once in a while because it's an op-ed, it's an essay, it's a long thing, very comprehensive, and it still hits. It's amazing. And at the time he wrote it, it was super controversial because it was not too long after Endgame and people thought he was just being contrary. But the amount of detail he goes into the sociopolitics of everything, the just the cultural elements, the economic elements, like everything, it's so comprehensive.
And even on top of that, how the MCU has changed how big budget movies are made, like literally has changed how they're made. From a craft level as well. Now, every Disney movie follows that template, meaning there's also, I will plug another interview I saw. I listened to this podcast run by drag queens. It's called Sloppy Seconds. But about a couple of months ago, they had a Justin Simeon, who is a filmmaker. He directed the Haunted Mansion movie that came out last year for Disney. And before that, he did Dear White People. So, he's worked for Netflix. And they were just interviewing him, and the two drag queens interviewing him don't really know about like how movies are made, and like they didn't have an agenda going in, but he, for some reason, felt very candid and open and honest about his experiences working with Disney. So I highly recommend watching that. It's only an hour long, but he goes into how the Haunted Mansion movie was made and the level of control he didn't have on that movie, how scenes were shot and blocked or not really blocked. How he mentioned like in the Haunted Mansion, the way the movie was shot is like, they had a set like a dining room table, and they had to shoot it from multiple different angles. And they had one actor sitting there, one actor sitting over in that corner. They had to just get the chair by itself. Like he was describing it. And then I have a friend who's in his 40s, and he's about to shoot his first feature right now. He got $3.5 million to do it. And so I've been like listening to that whole experience of him getting ready to shoot his first feature. But he told me when I was describing this interview with Justin Simeon, and I mentioned like all how the Haunted Mansion was filmed. He's like, oh yeah, that's data mining. He's like, what they're doing is they're coming in and they're collecting data, and then they make the movie in post-production. They piece it together, they design the shots. And that's why you have all these overworked VFX artists and everything like that. So basically the level of craft and care, well, I'm sure it's still there in certain areas. It has to be in design elements for sure. But the actual artistry, I guess, of making a movie of that scale is like almost completely gone from the American system at this point. And Marvel spearheaded that. I'm sure they kind of designed that. And now I'm seeing it. It's not just Disney that's doing it. Like all these Disney Plus shows are filmed that way too, for sure. That's why they all, in my opinion, look really awful. And like Wicked, which is for Universal. When I saw that trailer first come out, I was so disappointed because I like Wicked. I think it's a fun story. I like a good musical. I like the cast. But I saw that first trailer and I'm like, oh, this is a movie that has been created through data mining. It's not, the level of actual filmmaking craft is not there. So that to me has been like really disappointing to see it leave Disney. And, you know, WB did it with all their recent DC movies and everything like that. So
Yeah. No, I totally, that's just one of the factors, but I think there's so many different angles that you can take it. What I've noticed is the discussion around, because the what we're talking about right now is the discourse around cinema, not so much just the cinema itself. And for the longest time, Kevin Feige was hailed as being this creative individual that was also somehow just like you. He's on the ground. He wears a ball cap. He loves comics and superheroes and like, isn't this so cool? We're making this experience just for the fans. And for so long, people really got on board with that and with the idea that a studio could create some art, basically. And that happened for so long that I think it still hasn't really gone away. The idea that like any of the directors are just disposable, and that they're there to kind of, I don't know, fill a seat, maybe if they're lucky, get to add a little flair here or there in one or two scenes. But as long as they stay, with and the part about the MCU that made it even kind of worse is that what you could tell they have like tastemakers. So like Whedon was the tastemaker for a long time, and then they kind of added Gunn into it a little bit. But I noticed that a lot of movies outside of Disney also have the Whedonisms and the Gunnisms. It's like a cultural disease,
I think the word you're looking for, and it has gotten more prevalent since the Avengers, bathos.
Yeah. Oh no, I use that word all the time. Bathos.
I've never heard that word. What is it?
So bathos is basically when you set up a dramatic element only to subvert it at the end with a comedic, irreverent beat. So the idea is to undermine the dramatic moment. And you can do this in comedy to good effect by, it's funny sometimes when something is serious, but then you kind of undercut it. But bathos is, I guess there's nothing inherently negative about bathos. It could be positive or negative. But the problem is that the MCU is basically predicated on bathos. And we see this very, very widespread throughout, especially your large budget IP-based filming, a lot of bathos.
Is it spelled like pathos, but with a B?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I'd never heard that term before. I'll look more into it. But yeah, it's very cynical, that trend. And I also think it's kind of insulting to the viewer almost at times, because I feel like it's often deployed to make fun or not take seriously the genre or the fact that they're superheroes or, all this. It's not sincere. That's what I'm trying to say. And the lack of sincerity has permeated throughout so much of our culture, not just in art, but especially in art. And I think that can't help but rub off on how people interact with each other, how they form connections and stuff like that. So, it has much larger reaching implications culturally for sure. But yeah, bathos, bathos.
Think of it as the opposite of pathos.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like what Mike said, it really has taken over. Again, it's really started to explode since the Avengers because A, that movie made like $2 billion worldwide. And also you have directors and studio heads who basically want more of the thing that was popular. So they're essentially reverse engineering what made the first wave of Marvel movies like so popular. Because when you try to force what made something work organically the first time, you end up with art that feels more commercial, that feel insincere, as Josh put it.
So I don't know how in touch you guys are with like the tech space, but do you know how Apple really kind of got the terminology consumer friendly really popular amongst consumers? Like the term consumer friendly, they kind of coined the term.
Oh, yeah, I figured that came from him.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if it was Tim Cook who got it or if it was what's his name? Me so
Steve Jobs.
famous. Steve Jobs. Yeah, if it was him. But I recall them using that in a lot of their keynotes, and then people starting to use the word. And the funny thing about this is that, well, I'm going to spin this back into the whole film discussion we're having. We have these terminologies, these ideas kind of incepted into the minds of the audience. And the ideas were created in boardrooms. So like in the boardroom, like we need to like create this AI interface that's consumer friendly. And of course, this word has its own meaning. It doesn't just mean like what it means definitively. It has this whole context behind it. People adopt the word and they're using the word in this very corporate way. And in the same way, I would say people have kind of gotten like, here's one example. Cinematic universe. This is a Marvel idea. And now everyone's talking, they'll say, oh, is this in universe? Is this a part of the same verse? Oh, they're making a monster verse. They're doing this and like, so now it's a part of our lexicon, our vocabulary. And it's so corporate. It's like, in the past, we would have what we would call a spiritual successor. Okay. You could make a movie and you can make another movie that's a pastiche or it like pays like certain tribute or has a certain kind of feel of that old movie. Maybe it even has some of the same people that were involved in that project. And people would pick up on that. I mean, hey, this really feels like this. I like this movie because it's a spiritual successor. But now we're so just, I don't know how to put it. We're so dumb that we need someone to tell us, oh, yeah, this is in the same universe. We need to know that like this character can appear. Like it's so brain dead, So I just think that like we're really starting to adopt this very, very corporate mentality. And it's just hurting us because we're only like allowed to think the way that we're being told that we're allowed to think.
Keep talking while I try to pull up a quote that Richard Linklater said about how audiences aren't
being infantilized.
Yeah, audiences haven't really grown up is basically what he said.
Yeah. If you type in like Linklater and like infantilize, I think it'll come up. But yeah, no, I think that it's interesting. I use the terminology fantasy studio. You kind of expanded on that or added to a little bit. You said fantasy studio executive, which I think is actually a better terminology, where now we get to go online and we get to indulge in all the content that's coming out a second time by talking about what all these different franchises mean in the meta. So it's like, oh, what's the narrative is, this is going to be better than this, but it has nothing to do with the experience of watching the film. It has everything to do with how much money they're making or, oh, will it have legs and all this stuff. And the thing is that this has always, I guess, been the case to a certain extent. But of course, I think social media comes into play with that because now we have so much information. We get to see all the interviews and all the red carpets. And every time an actor makes a tweet or posts a picture or something like that, we're so tied into the experience of making the film and, producing it and all that. We don't really get to just zero all that out and just experience it much anymore. There's all this other noise. And I think it really also has a lot of effect because too, if you're talking about a movie, if you're a movie critic or movie reviewer, and you're talking about like box office or if you're talking about any like the producer level stuff, I think you kind of lost the script. And I
And
think
I noticed that that lens is very prominent on YouTube. Like I was just like earlier before I got on here, Gladiator 2, the trailer came out today. I was watching someone react to it. I wanted to see their thoughts. And before they even watched the trailer, they went into this whole thing about the ballooning budget for the movie. You know, it's 350 million. And I'm like, why is this like necessary to you watching the trailer? But it's everything. You have YouTubers who have built massive followings and I don't know, for lack of a better term, I don't know. I don't want to insult anyone, but people who are not
Grifter?
they're grifters for sure. But I'm thinking of a couple people in particular. But
I know exactly
Nerdrotic, Mauler,
Grace Randolph, that's what I was saying. But who does like box office reports, and her entire lens for engaging with movies is how successful is this going to be? Is this going to make money? What does that say? Should this project that's forthcoming, who should they cast? Is this person bankable? And I'm like, what the hell are you talking? Like, why are you even in this field if you're only going to try to algorithmize everything and try to build a formula for success? I'm like, that's so stupid. Like, and again, that's that logical, mathematical thinking, which is important to build buildings to protect us, to, to create safe roads to drive on, to engineer, stuff we need. That's what that stuff should be used for. You can't use it to engineer a work of art. Yeah. And the fact that is what it has now become across the board, particularly I'm thinking of like, major, we live in a country where our mainstream art is entirely controlled by corporations. Whereas like in Europe and Australia and all these other countries, a lot of them have film foundations like that the government set up specifically. And that comes with its own set of strings, I'm sure, but it makes it more of a cultural investment, to use an economical term, and not a corporate investment.
So I found the quote from a Linklater interview. This is the part that's about audiences not growing up. He says, now I think the message society is sending is just stay a 13-year-old forever, maybe a 12-year-old. When I was a kid, we were neglected. They didn't make movies for us. You watch whatever's out there and good luck. Every now and then there was a kids movie, but the whole culture wasn't bending to kids any more than the parents were bending to kids. They had an ad at 10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are? That was a real thing all over our country because, oh yeah, the kids, I don't know where they are. So they didn't care. They didn't cater to kids. Now it's all about the kids. We're going to overprotect them and we're going to make movies. We're just going to reduce the entire culture, conversation, and mentality to their level. And guess what? You don't have to grow up either. Just stay a kid forever. Play with toys, read comic books, never mature. Don't even have sex while you're at it. And good luck.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I would say that it's a complicated situation because I don't think that the infantilizing of the modern day adult is purely cultural. I think it's economic. I think it has a whole bunch of tendrils that create that. People are just growing up later due to things that have been set in motion, years back. So it's not even necessarily the MCU's fault that happened, but they absolutely capitalized on it and they made it worse for sure.
And they epitomized it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, to talk about what's forthcoming, like Deadpool and Wolverine, I don't know what this movie is. Like, it's, I know what it is on some level, but I don't know. It's riding off of nostalgia for stuff that's like 25 years old. It's
what Endgame was. Well, so at the time when Endgame came out, I called it a victory lap. And the reason why I called it a victory lap was because the reason why you watched the movie, the reason why you enjoyed the movie, you endorsed the movie, you talked about the movie, was sheerly for the fact that the movie existed, not in what form it existed, right? And in this case, in the Deadpool and Wolverine situation, it's the same thing. Everyone, any discussion, anything that's being talked about, any value the movie has is only happening due to it existing, not because of the form that it exists in. Like, they could have done this movie several different ways, but the conversation's still going to look the same. It doesn't really matter necessarily like how they shoot it or what the plot is, or if you can even remember any of these things. The only thing that's going to be important is that it's happening, and if more things like this can happen again. That's all that anyone cares about.
To be fair, though, the movie isn't out yet, so nobody's really given a chance to have any of the deeper conversations yet. But to your other points, I do actually agree.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, right? So watching before you can make a judgment is always going to be the case all the time. And I think that, sure, I mean, it's true. You can't really criticize a movie, but we're not talking about the movie. We're talking about the discourse, right?
That's true.
So that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, well, I guess I was the one who was kind of leaning into talking about the movie. I just feel like it's predictable at this point. And again, in talking about the discourse is about artists supporting an artist's vision. Whose vision is Deadpool and Wolverine? Is it Ryan Reynolds? Is it Hugh Jackman's? Is it Sean Levy's? Is it Kevin Feige's? Is it the Marvel machine? Like, what is this movie say? And this is paraphrasing Martin Scorsese, where he said, this is not a cinema of emotion. Like, what emotions is this conveying? What politics is this work conveying? I will say, this might be controversial, but I want to just include it. A critic who I've known about for years, and I fully discovered this year, is Armand White, who is a Black gay conservative. So all those different identity factors are like, try holding all of that in one space together. I think is pretty crazy. But his lens through tackling movies, which I don't agree with his political stance, I think he's kind of very reactionary, and he's gone a little too far off the beaten path as an individual. But if I'm looking at his criticism and the ethos of his criticism, he says that art is politics. You can't disentangle the two from each other. Politics meaning like how we engage with each other, our worldview, our system of beliefs. And Mike, you asked me this question on Twitter, I guess last week. How do we disentangle this, this kind of brainwashed or conditioned capitalist mindset that we kind of are raised with? Especially in the US. But I think it's committing to a belief system, a set of values. You don't have to be rigid on them, of course, but the best filmmakers, the ones that really resonate with me, are ones who I feel like have a commitment, a conviction. That's the term I want to use, a conviction to what they think, what they feel, what they believe, and they want to convey that to an audience. And I just don't see any conviction in a lot of mainstream Hollywood produced entertainment nowadays. And the discourse around it, I don't think is searching for that conviction or trying to elucidate where that conviction is. I think it's dancing around it without actually tackling it, for a lot of what I see. But anyway, yeah. And I will say Armand White, a lot of caveats with that guy, obviously. But I do think his ethos, he spent most of his career, even before he became reactionary. Like, I remember he was the first guy who gave a rotten review to Toy Story 3, and people were pissed at him. Like, how dare you give Toy Story 3
I know exactly who that is. I've been reading his work for a long time. So yeah, I really enjoy his work a lot, actually. So
yeah, I watched Amistad earlier this year. It was like a blind spot for me in Spielberg's filmography. I watched it. I was a little confused on my feelings of it. And then I found Armand White's review of it from 1997, 98, I think it was. And his review, by far the best written piece of film criticism I have ever read in my life for that movie. It made me cry, like, reading it.
Wow.
Really, it did. I'm not even joking. And then I read some of his other reviews, and I don't agree with his political system of belief, but I think that's also like an American problem too. We always got to otherize the person who thinks differently than we do, without thinking maybe that there is some kind of value within their own worldview, or how they interpret stuff. So, yeah, that's kind of controversial to say, using like a hardcore. He now writes for like the National Review. So I don't read a lot of his recent stuff, because especially since Trump became president, he's gotten too far off the beaten path for me. Oof. But his writing and his ethos of his criticism, which he contradicts himself all the time. Everyone contradicts themselves. But I think that really like ignited something in me when I discovered it earlier this year, and watching Amistad and reading his review of it from 1998, that like really kind of changed how I engage with movies and art in general. And I think it's really helped a lot. And it kind of like takes the capitalism out of it. It makes it pure art. And that I really appreciate.
Which is something I've had issues with, especially when it comes to negative reviews. We kind of touched about this like towards the beginning, where people, people have a hard time engaging with the art, even or especially if it's a piece of art that they don't like. Like they
don't understand. You don't have
yeah.
to.
And that's why I just take so much issue with the way some negative reviews are written, because they are less engaging and more dismissive. Like almost like there's a little bit of like willful ignorance to certain themes and like certain creative choices that are made. You don't have to like the things that you don't like, but at least try to understand why you don't like something.
I made a tweet about this earlier, but I was talking about how goodwill is something that I think is missing on both the audience and on the creators side nowadays. Talking about the audience, I think that more self-criticism is needed. Because the thing is that I've been struggling to try to figure out if film criticism is even useful to begin with. Because I think that that's a whole like philosophy and subject that I could get into,
Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I've been having the same exact question recently. And I think that's a good thing to be having that thought. Because at the end of the day, I feel for me personally, I deeply value film criticism. I'm not a critic. I don't identify as one, but I really love and appreciate critics and what they do. And I think that if you look at film criticism as an art form unto itself, I took a class in college on aesthetics specifically, and we read an essay by, I believe it was Oscar Wilde. And Oscar Wilde was talking about the role that a critic should hold when it comes to their relationship with a work of art and their relationship to the audience. And they should act as, I guess, a buffer of sorts who culls through a work of art and finds the diamonds of insight within it and then shares that insight with the public. And I think that's a very rigid definition that many may not agree with, but I think that that's, in looking at criticism itself as an art form about art, I think might help in seeing the value of it. But I think it's a profession that, like anything, like you need to be skilled at, and I think like any profession, it's filled with people who don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, in regards to like criticism, I think that, a little bit more self-criticism, I think would be good. When I'm writing something, I try to take it from both sides. Like, okay, what is my gut reaction? What do I want to say? Why do I want to say it? Is it really true? And do I want to write this down? And is it valuable in any kind of way? And if I do, should I qualify it? And so you should have like a whole structure behind each and every thought, I think. And you should also kind of let the reader into your thought process, into the process itself, to help them really understand where you're coming from. Because I think what happens is that there are a lot of readers and there's a lot of critics who view their criticism as a method of either, it's not so much criticism or praise. It's not that. It's more like a demotion or a promotion. Like, oh, is this something that I want to promote or is it something that I want to demote? And like the product itself, like, oh, I want to put, a boo-boo on this guy's record, so I'm going to make it a bad review and I can say whatever I want. Or, oh, I want to lift this guy up, I think it's a good thing, but they should try to be a little more objective with it, I feel. And I don't think that's always happening. There are a lot of hit pieces, and the fact that we have to qualify that this is a hit piece or not just tells you right there that it's a problem. There's definitely an ethic, I think, in criticism that's kind of hit and miss.
If it was ever really there at all, especially now that there's sort of a bleeding of several different varieties of journalists who are, I guess, invading the critical space.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people I liken them to just being, you're not a critic, you're a cultural commentator.
Yes.
That's how I would describe it.
And to be clear, I will never refer to myself as a film critic because A, that title for me just feels too limiting. And B, I just prefer to call myself a media commentator because that opens me up to all sorts of discussions, including one like this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I I've kind of gone back and forth with it. I think that there was a time where I thought criticism was useful. And I think the way that it's useful is that what you can do is you can share with people how you view the entertainment. It's less about the entertainment itself. It's more about giving people a frame of reference of how you go through the entertainment, how you're actually analyzing and the values and whatnot of the entertainment. Um, that can be useful because it allows someone to read your work and then to gain additional perspective they didn't have before. So they're coming away with something more. Whereas a lot of people, like, especially a lot of YouTube guys, which I have a love-hate relationship with, they seem to view criticism as like, oh, I have the ability to save people money or to give them a good time at the theater.
Well, that's kind of how the original American field of cinema or film-related criticism started. I mean, it was in newspapers, and that's like the star rating. I mean, I controversially have had thoughts in the past and have voiced opinions about how I think kind of giving a movie a star rating is kind of stupid to me, but
I
because
agree,
it's
100%.
providing a monetary or a numerical value to something. And I get it's like it's easy shorthand with Letterboxd become this whole thing. And that's kind of going back to what I said before, why I don't want to have a Letterboxd account.
Well, this is what you do. See, I had for a little while, I had the star ratings. I went through, and you have to do it one by one, but I was committed. I went through every movie that I've ever watched, and I deleted the star rating off of it.
I haven't done that, but I also, I guess starting like last year around November, I made the conscious decision to stop doing star ratings.
Mm-hmm.
Like I will still keep a running list of all the movies that I've seen each year, but no more stars, no more flattening my thoughts on a film to like a numerical value. Now I actually want to take like, even if I'm not always writing coherent thoughts, like on Letterboxd, I still want to put more focus on the words, not the numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like open a dialogue, have a conversation about the film, give someone a frame of reference of how you view it, what you were thinking before, during, and after. And when you do it this way, there's so much more that you can write about. Because like when I first started doing reviews a long, long time ago, it would be very formulaic. It'd be like, visuals, like music, acting, plot. And then I would put like a number next to each one. And I'd do I'm ashamed.
Yeah,
I'm ashamed.
That's the thing. Like now I've become a lot more loose with the way I write. I'll still just like kind of throw in a synopsis just so people who haven't seen the movie or probably even haven't heard of it just kind of understand what it's about. But what I'm writing can be just however I feel the point needs to get across. Sometimes I'll talk about all of the elements of the film, or sometimes I'll just focus on one that really stands out. But again, this is kind of why me calling myself a film critic is just too limiting because there's more to me than just one thing.
If you didn't have another plan, wanted to suggest one, maybe we can talk about toxic negativity and toxic positivity. I was a conversation we had a few times, both in the DMs and on the timeline. And it also kind of, I think, fits into the discussion that we're having. Unless you had something else that you wanted to.
Well, actually, there was another thought I had. I wanted to talk about how, and kind of still sticking with this criticism thing and talking about the economics of it. Critics are very underpaid. They don't make a lot of money. It's not a lucrative profession by any stretch of the imagination. But I still think that critics do hold, as the tastemakers, as the cultural bearers, they do hold a lot of power culturally that I don't think they may realize that they hold. And to kind of bring it back to my introduction, like the website, Badass Digest, Birth Movies Death, and other related film blogger websites, which were very prominent and were kind of like the pre-film Twitter back in the late 2000s, 2010s period. I legitimately think that they have in many ways are responsible for the current zeitgeist we're in, because a lot of them were comprised of your stereotypical neckbeard dude bro film critic who grew up reading comics, who was very passionate about how these characters were depicted, and ended up, kind of influencing the trajectory, I feel, a lot of how the modern cinematic landscape has become. I don't know if you'd agree with that or not, but
No, that is definitely the case.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that, because I would say that there is that kind of critic, but I would say that's more of your like YouTuber kind of, right? It's not really like your professional critic. Like there was a time where professional critics were like the snobby guys that would never, they would turn their nose up at the everyman's movie, like the comic books and the cool dude stuff, right? They'd turn their nose up at that. And then you'd have like the more YouTuber guys that came up later on that were like, oh, we're going to be the voice of the people, you know? So then you had the critics, they were kind of off doing their own thing. They were very like, pretentious and snobby or whatever. And then you had the YouTubers who were kind of like a break from that. But now it seems like it's morphed into something completely different, where it's like you have a pro studio, which honestly, I don't even know why the critics and the audience are even at odds anymore, because it seems like whatever
they're one and the same almost.
they're almost one and the same. Like everyone is just basically just trying to uphold the status quo. That's all they're trying to do. So,
well, and then you even see, I mean, I think studios like Marvel, they're the all that's evil in the world, I guess, in this conversation. But they literally wine and dine, so to speak, these social media influencers, these YouTubers. They bring them out to the premiere. I think they know the power that they hold. Is what I was thinking. Is like by getting these people and having them be credentialized by Rotten Tomatoes. Like, I'm not even joking. I'm 100% certain that a lot of studios will select filmmakers for projects, big budget projects, based off of like, okay, well, what did they made before? What is the Rotten Tomatoes? Like that factors into it. Like
they put it on the DVDs, like, oh, it's fresh on the mate. Like,
yeah, it's so bizarre.
Yeah. But the thing is that I don't know. I kind of disagree with the idea that the birth movies that kind of the dude bro crowd is who the studio critic is, because I don't know, maybe it is now, but I don't think that a lot of the critics actually believe what they're saying. Like you read it and it feels like there's a disconnect between what they're saying and what the movie was.
Well, I'm thinking mostly of Zack Snyder, we talk about a lot, but I think 2016 in particular was such a fascinating year. I mean, and you started your podcast, Mike, with you said in between Man of Steel and BVS. Like I feel like that space of the internet was where a lot of those conversations were happening.
Like how Zach was a Trumpian era movie.
Which is like, in my opinion, is so wildly from the truth and is wrong, just straight up wrong to insinuate about anyone. But the discussions that were had there, and then the embracing of the MCU over the more idiosyncratic artistic vision, really set a trend for how people think. And like, it's gotten to the point where I feel like a lot of those opinions are just taken as fact now. Or all those mischaracterizations where like you talk to your average person who is just kind of dipping their toes in the film space, they already have their opinion made up about this filmmaker because they've kind of been led to believe that's how they are, And I'm like, well, that's not accurate. That's wrong. But
and also I think that, I don't know, narratives, like right now we're talking very meta. We're talking about narratives. And I think that everyone is talking about narratives and talking about the meta. And I think what it does is it stops people from just experiencing the movies. One recent trend that I've seen that I really dislike is what you would call the media literacy discussion. I can't stand it. It's so stupid. And like, listen, maybe definitively we could say that there is such thing as media literacy. Like, sure. But the way that it's being discussed is so dumb, because it seems as though that there are individuals who kind of want to take a hold of narratives on entertainment based on many times a very specific kind of framework, right? And they want to basically just say like, okay, this movie is good because it follows certain, values, or it's bad because it doesn't follow certain values, or it follows other values. And I think that this is kind of just like an inverse of what we've been talking about.
Would you agree that the whole media literacy thing falls apart because people are too caught up in their own bias for for media literacy arguments to hold any water?
Well, I think what happens is media literacy is kind of fine. Like, I get it. Like, you should have a kind of a formula of how you look at content. But a lot of the media literate types, from what I've seen, don't have any self awareness or self scrutiny at all. It's like you should be having some kind of struggle within yourself to kind of figure out. There should be some humility there. There should be some
Mhm.
openness there. There's like none of that. And it's all just about like running
It's
every movie
ego
through this
based,
filter. Exactly.
like
And
trying to prove that you're better. And I think a lot of people do engage with art and media in that way. They go into it trying to, and I'm guilty of this. I will fully admit, like sometimes I feel like the movie that I'm watching needs to earn my approval. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I go in skeptical, and I'm trying to get away from that and not go in so skeptical. Like today, I like had to drag myself to Maxine because all of the discourse around the movie that I've seen, everyone that I've talked to who's already seen it hated it or thought it was a waste of time. And I was like, oh, I feel like I'm just seeing this movie out of an obligation. I wasn't going because I was genuinely curious or, like just wanted to go with a blank slate. And that's hard to like in our modern digital world where we're getting everyone's opinions thrown at us at once. But when I did sit down and saw it, I'm like, that was a fine movie. Like, it was like, and I get that's not engaging with it super in depth and thinking, what does it do right? What does it do wrong? But like, sometimes it's okay to go see a movie and be like, oh, that was fine, and
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. But yeah, I do think that there is this need for the film to prove itself to you, the viewer, maybe, or I don't know, you think you're
Yeah.
better than what you're watching. I think that's very prevalent.
Also, I think that sometimes I get this as a person who engages with media and movies. You go see a movie, and I have a real difficult time saying anything about the movie. And I think that we have to come to understand that, especially if you're online all the time, you don't always have to have an opinion about everything.
The take
Like,
economy.
yeah, it's like you simply don't have to have an opinion. Like, I don't know enough about certain things to even have an opinion. So, so to watch a movie and to have enjoyed it, but not really having to say is completely fine. And maybe you should just let someone else talk about it.
A perfect example of what you just said about not everyone needs to have a take on everything. I was witnessing the whole drama over the weekend about Miami Vice. I'm not going to name the people at the center of that discourse just out of respect, but I was just watching all of that happen on the sidelines. But because I haven't seen the movie, so I didn't really have much to contribute on that front, but also because how this drama all unfolded was just confounding, like beyond belief. So I stay out of it. I didn't interact with any of the posts, any of the dogpiling, all of that, just because I felt I didn't have anything to contribute. So I wasn't going to bother. And that's okay. You don't have to get involved in every single discourse if you don't want to.
Yeah, I was reading that, but I don't believe I retweeted anything from that, or like really engage or talk to anyone. Actually, I think one person I spoke to, but it was kind of like, it wasn't like directly about the subject. It was kind of more of a broad thing. And we kind of had a discussion or whatever. But yeah, I was kind of just bewildered. Like, I don't know what's going on here. Like, this is really weird. I don't even feel like I'm a part of the community that I'm around. I don't know who these people are. Like, these are all these really deep film Twitter critic types that watch certain kinds of movies and they all know each other. And I don't know these people. So that's what I felt. But yeah, I think that social media plays a big role in the discussion, and it's just an overwhelm of information. Honestly, the times that I've enjoyed movies the most were when the movie wasn't talked about, which is funny because those are usually the niche films, right? And I like the niche films because they're niche, because I don't know anything about them and I get to experience them completely just unclouded. And I can go in and I can just watch it with no pre-existing thoughts or anything like that. That isn't to say that it's good or not, but it definitely really adds to the experience. And I wish I could watch most movies that way. Whereas I feel like there's definitely an economy right now around watching movies just to be able to speak about them afterwards. And so, yeah, I don't have much more to say about that. But
Well, I would to like kind of flip the coin on that, whatever the expression is. I will say I am grateful, even though I'm not on it officially with an account, that for an app like Letterbox, because some of the best like genuine film criticism I've read in the last couple of years has been off of there and has really like helped me embrace filmmakers that I had been led to believe, I guess, by discourse leading up to it. Like I can think of a filmmaker like Paul W.S. Anderson, who is considered to be awful, I guess, by the critical cultural establishment, you know?
mhm.
And I went on Letterboxd and I found a community and a group of people who love him and love his movies and love engaging with the movies on their terms. And I'm like, wait, am I missing something here? Like, what is going on? And so I did my own little like marathon of his movies. And if I didn't really know how I felt about them afterwards, I would go to Letterboxd and I'd look at these people's reviews of it. And like they wrote so eloquently and so emotionally about what his movies were conveying that I'm like, oh, of course, this filmmaker is not bad. Like, I think I don't know, it's kind of rewiring your brain to engage with filmmakers and artists in a different way than what
The
you've been led to
discussion
believe.
around him has gotten quite toxic. I haven't seen a lot of his films. I think I might have seen some of the Resident Evil films like on TV in the past. They've been around for a while. Alien versus Predator, I saw. Mortal Kombat, I saw at one time. I think I saw Pompeii. It's been a hot minute since I watched that. I watched the Monster Hunter movie, which I actually thought was really well shot and well made for like a movie with only like two or three actors in it. And it's like very isolated, and the cinematography is like really good for this movie based on this game that has no plot. But got completely panned, and of course, him with his wife being in the movies, people chafe at that idea, and they call him all sorts of things, and I don't know, but yeah, the fact that you were able to actually kind of like separate from the zeitgeist and the narrative around him, and be able to see his movies in a new light, that's cool.
I was just gonna say that's probably like the best way to engage with a filmmaker that maybe you've had the wrong impression of. And I think another contemporary filmmaker who's kind of going through the same thing with a certain set of fans, M. Night Shyamalan. And
Yeah,
I don't just say that because he's got a new one coming this summer, and his daughter made her directorial debut earlier last month. But I have seen over the past couple of years people just fully embracing Shyamalan as an artist that's worth paying attention to, and not just like the stuff that has been like actually well received, even like his lesser works like The Village or even The Happening.
Some consider those his best works. I think The Village might be my top 3 favorite Shyamalan films.
Nice.
And that's the beauty of art, right? I mean, it is subjective. I know that's like a truism or almost like a bumper sticker, but like it really is. It's like, what someone else could feel repulsed by or reject immediately, someone else could view to be one of the most life affirming things they've seen, So it's, I think and Shyamalan, to go back to a point made before, is like 1,000%, in my opinion, a filmmaker who has conviction with what he's
he
doing.
funds a lot of his own movies, and he's very heavily involved in them.
Oh, that's also, you mentioned funding, like the original thing with Kevin Costner, why the interjection or the plea for studio notes really pissed me off is I'm like, Horizon is a self-funded. He put 38 million. I mean, the money doesn't matter. The number doesn't matter. But the fact that that is the means by which his project was created, like this is something that like should be discussed more. And I feel like this year in particular, there are 3 projects that I'm like deeply fascinated by for what they mean for where the industry is at right now, where the art form's at right now. And one is Horizon, one's Megalopolis. Francis Ford Coppola entirely self-funded that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Rebel Moon director's cuts, I'm throwing that in there because I think the conversation around that has been largely to attack the artists when like the means of the production of the work itself, the fact that you're getting the artist's full vision, no matter what hoops had to be jumped through, no matter what stipulations were made by the corporation who funded it, the fact that the pure artistic creative vision is going to be released in less than a month now, I think more people need to be talking about that and or celebrating that, regardless if they like the quality or they connect with the final end result or not. There's lots more interesting conversations that Discourse could have right now, and they're not.
Speaking of director's cuts, before we get to our final topic, a little bit of breaking news. I still don't know if there's a release date yet, but Ridley Scott has more to say about his R-rated director's cut of Napoleon.
Yeah, I just saw that. That really makes me happy because I was afraid we would never see that.
Same.
What do you say?
It got rated. I think it got rated R. Like somehow someone came across a rating classification for it. So that means
it's on its way.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
I'm happy you brought that out because we almost kind of forgot about talking about the Megalopolis and just the attack on the creators in general, which, it's interesting because I follow a lot on YouTube, a lot of reactionary YouTube people like a Critical Drinker and his whole network of people, right? Just to kind of see what they're saying. I used to follow them unironically. Now I've kind of gotten exhausted with them. But
good.
Nevertheless, because the thing is that I'm excited and I think that it is good for studios to have pushback. But the means by which you do it, I think, is also important. I don't think they do a very good job. As a matter of fact, I think most of them just want to return to like a 2019 MCU is all they really want. So, and I didn't like the MCU before that. So they're not really speaking to me. But it's interesting because a lot of people who seem to be against Disney and a lot of the big corporations also seem to be very much against the creator. And I don't know how that works. It just seems like people want to capture the cultural zeitgeist. They want to capture the machine and then just turn the machine around to pump out content that kind of looks like something they want to make. And I think that's something that I've noticed a lot on Twitter and on YouTube and things like that, where it just seems like this is an issue just as much with the audience as it is with the critics. And that really bums me out.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's something that drives me up a wall when the certain subsect of audience members and even YouTubers, who are, to paraphrase a quote from the last Star Wars movie, I don't care if this creator wins. I just need Disney to lose. That kind of mentality I can't ever really get behind. I would rather people with a platform spend more time focusing on the things that they're genuinely passionate about, things that they love, as opposed to beating down on the same topic over and over again to the point where you're basically just talking about nothing.
Toxicity, positive, negative. Let's talk about it. This is a perfect segue.
Exactly.
Well, I will say on that front, I mean, the toxic negativity thing, I tend to tweet or have opinions a lot, especially recently, about Marvel, the MCU machine and everything. And, I've had some semi-controversial takes on that, even in interpersonal relationships with friends. By reiterating the same point over and over again, I think it is an important point to make. Is the MCU all bad? Is it all good? Is it somewhere in between? Right now, I'm inclined to think it's all bad, but that's maybe just because of the current state of where we're at.
I thought about it heavily, and it's so close to all bad that it's functionally all bad. It's a net negative, and at this point, the scales need to be tipped. They have to.
Oh, yeah, but going off that, what I wanted to mention is people get upset at you being negative, or they view you just saying, hey, this is what I'm noticing, or this is frustrating me, or this is really, I don't know, this is weighing on my mind heavily, so I have to keep going back to this point over and over again, or, whatever. And part of that is because it's the take economy, and negative takes, I think, tend to gain more traction than positive. That's just how data has dictated people engage online, whatever. It sucks. But I also do think that another dimension to that is when it comes to superhero related media or quote unquote nerd geek related media, it's because I think, or just media in general, I think a lot of people tie their sense of self-worth up into what they're consuming and engaging with. It's very odd to me. Like, and I struggled with this before. Like, I was a kid who was raised like being deeply invested in comic books and like loving superheroes, feeling like seen by them and represented by them and all that stuff. And so it was a gradual process for me as well to kind of see the MCU for what it is and to kind of divorce it from, no, it's not the characters that I care about, or it's not these specific storylines that I'm excited to see on screen.
It's what they represent.
Yeah, or it's just the genuine creativity of it, the artistic practice of it. Like, what made me fall in love with these characters was the creativity that made them who they are. And when like that creativity has become something else in the name of profit and the name of a brand,
it's not what you love anymore.
Exactly. I guess that's a quantum leap people need to make. And a lot aren't able to do that. Instead, it's just, it's easy to like, and some people probably genuinely believe that it's good, you know, still. Yeah. Although I'm like, really? Like, I don't know. At this point, it's kind of hard to.
The classic discussion, and I keep trying to bring in my normal everyday friends and family because I want to really drive home that this isn't just a Twitter specific situation. It's not isolated only online. But like you tell people like, so, you know, you're talking to your friend and the discussion of like a Marvel movie comes up, you know, especially like a big one that everyone went to go see, like, oh, you know, Endgame, like, what'd you think about Endgames? Oh, I didn't go see Endgames. Like, what? Like, what? Like, why didn't you go see us? Oh, I wasn't interested in, oh, so you're not a Marvel guy, huh? It's like, well, so it turns into like a brand thing. It's like, first and foremost, my favorite superheroes stories of all time are all Marvel. My favorite character, Spider-Man. I love the X-Men. Hulk. I even like Fantastic Four, and everyone craps on Fantastic Four. I like Fantastic Four.
I do too. You're not the only one. That was actually like the first comic I ever read.
So I didn't really like the DC comics that much. I just felt they were kind of, I mean, to be honest, they were kind of boring. I didn't like Superman that much. Batman, I wasn't that much of a fan of. I loved Cassandra Cain's Batgirl. That first run, oh, so good. I read it so many times. It's so good. And I like, you know, Young Justice was pretty good. Teen Titans okay. And I picked up a few things here and there, like a few graphic novels, but mostly it was Marvel stuff, right? But the thing that people like, it's just this big Coke Pepsi thing, and it's really people are thinking in very, very narrow terms, and they go see Spider-Man movies because it has Spider-Man in it. Like, and people will tell you this outright. You go to YouTube, you go on social media, people will say, man, you know, I'm not so sure about how this movie is going to be, but it's got Superman in it, so I got to go see it. It's like people are open with this. This is not a secret. And that's really a shame because people aren't going to see things because they have a more sophisticated idea of what it is that they enjoy. They have kind of an image of what they like, and that image can be easily exploited, and it's very unfortunate.
That's exactly what studios have done for, I would say, probably since like the 2000s. They've taken the things that we all kind of grew up loving and commodified them to the nth degree.
Yeah. And on that point, I also think I wanted to make this point earlier where like you couldn't really not like when I mentioned the MCU has like created what we now see as the modern blockbuster movie and how it's made and the data mining aspect of it. That is like a confluence of like culture, technology, taste level, all these different things coming together at once to make that happen. But I feel like in years past, and that's changed criticism as well and discourse as well, because now I feel like the discourse is at a level where you have to like, or me personally, I feel I have to like cradle the sanctity of like creativity and art when like in decades ago, that was kind of a given. I think like you had to have a competency to make craft. You couldn't hide how bad a movie looked because, but now it's like movies look bad or they look like a Samsung commercial or they look like something that's not a movie and people will just willfully ignore that or act like they don't see it because of their own biases or whatever, or they're really looking forward to see Deadpool and Wolverine team up or whatever the case may be. But it's like criticism in years past could focus in more on what the movie was doing, what it was saying, how things landed or not. And maybe that's me being like hagiographic. I didn't really grow up in that time. I only know the period that I'm in, but I'm pretty sure that there's been an arc and like things have shifted. And now for where criticism's at now, I even see professional critics trying to like advocate and grasp for like a filmmaker like Michael Mann or something like that. Whereas like in years past, yeah, Michael Mann's an artist. Let's talk about the art. Let's not talk about how it is art. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And in regards to how the relationship between these commodified properties and the audience, I think that part of it's the audience and part of it is definitely the studios. I feel like they've really done a massive disservice stretching the limits to which the certain IPs will be accepted amongst their audience to the absolute nth degree because they know that people will watch the content as long as those characters or those images, those logos are visible, as long as it's a part of their franchise, right?
And to tie this back into our conversation about toxic positivity and toxic negativity, they really have a symbiotic relationship because a lot of the toxic positivity comes from, shocker, the MCU, where, and we're talking like at the height of their critical and commercial success, where God forbid someone writes a negative review for, I don't know, Thor Ragnarok. You have all of the MCU fans hounding them like wolves just because they thought, oh, okay, this one was fine, I guess. And the reason it's toxic positivity is because, as I mentioned, the MCU is already like at its peak in terms of commercial success. Critics are liking it. They are, for all intents and purposes, the winners, and yet they're still being sour about it.
So basically, they're sore winners, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I think they know inherently, like when Scorsese comes out and says this isn't cinema, when Coppola comes out and says this isn't cinema, the actual progenitors of the art form itself are saying it's not art. I think that ignited something in,
cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, because I think they know inherently that these people are right on some level too. Like, like it's a valid opinion backed up by experience and facts and all this other stuff. So maybe not facts because it's a subjective opinion, but you know what I mean? Like, I think that they know that. And it just, I don't know. The validation that they are receiving from the critical and commercial prospects of the work is not enough.
Yeah. I would go even further to say that it's not just about the idea of like you being on top or you being on bottom. It's not like trying to balance the scales. I think it's more about the idea that you've internalized this movie as like something that needs to be, you're defending yourself, and I don't really feel like I need to recite all my accolades within the Snyder fandom. I was basically here at day one. I was here during the Man of Steel backlash, during what we call the BVS wars, released the Snyder Cut. My channel, we actually did the initial release of the news that Ray Porter was going to be the voice of Darkseid. Like I broke that.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, people on my podcast talked to Snyder. I didn't get to do it personally, but we, the podcast had the privilege of that. And we've just been very, very tied in from day one. But lately, I've been kind of critical toward Snyder fans on some of the decisions they've tried to make and some of the narratives like with Rebel Moon and things like that. I just think that aren't quite it. And I get some really harsh backlash that I don't feel. I mean, I could write paragraphs. I could be as articulate and as nuanced and as balanced as I possibly could be, but no amount of balance is going to shield me from not being on the narrative, like not being on, like I missed the what is the terminology? Like I didn't get the assignment,
Not keeping to the consensus, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing with any franchise or whatnot. It's like it's a really collective mindset that I think is what causes both negativity, because like there's no self-awareness or analysis. Like if you hate, let's say, whatever's going on with the Acolyte or whatever, and let's say you are watching the Acolyte, like I'm not watching the Acolyte, it isn't really something that's for me, so I'm just not going to deal with it. But let's say I was watching the Acolyte and I didn't like it. Sometimes people speak and then you read one tweet, you read another tweet, you read like 10 tweets, and they all say basically the same thing. there's like no self-awareness. And that's where I think that it becomes toxic. And the same thing I think happens with positivity. It's like maybe people should spend some more time playing devil's advocate, or maybe questioning things that people in their own group are saying, or, splitting hairs and stuff like that. It's much more interesting.
That's why I wanted to do this podcast, because whether I know it or not, sometimes maybe in the past I have leaned a little bit towards the toxic positivity. And I've never really agreed with people who have reduced their timeline to an echo chamber of only people they agree with. I think it's healthy to interact with a more diverse group of people and different opinions. So yeah, I totally am with you that like we need to have A, more self-awareness, and B, an openness and curiosity for other dissenting voices to a certain extent.
Yeah, I would say that. The thing is, the whole openness thing to like other dissenting voices, I don't have any problem with anyone who wants to do that. But what I will say is I think it does kind of discount one's ability for introspection. I don't truly think that you must subject yourself to someone who has a dissenting voice in order for you to be. It works every once in a while as a mirror or as like a sounding board. Like, it certainly doesn't hurt, right? But I think that, like, for instance, me in the Snyder fandom, like there's no bigger Snyder caper than me. Like, I've been in it. I started my entire brand because of it, right? But I took a little time away. I came back, and I just feel like I'm not being honest. I feel a little icky because I just don't think, I just noticed the tendency for myself to curtail what I have to say, or to just not say it at all, based on some kind of pressure. And I just dislike that in any circumstance. I'm kind of a contrarian.
So what are you being pressured to not say, if I'm just curious?
Well, for instance, Rebel Moon. I didn't watch the second one. I watched the first one. Right? And I personally didn't like it for many reasons. But even with it, let's say I did like it, I've noticed that it's more of a matter of principle. I watched the movie and I just could tell right away that this is not Zack Snyder's work. And yet, most people on my timeline are promoting it as if it is. They're promoting it in the same way they would promote Man of Steel, BVS, Justice League, in the same sort of revolutionary and just congratulatory manner. And it's like, we should be saving this energy for his actual movie. He made sacrifices. He made the sacrifice that he had to compromise to the studio to get his actual vision out there. And unfortunately, it's as far as the two movies, there's a gap in between them, a quite large gap. That's unfortunate in my opinion. But we've put so much effort into being like, oh, this is the best. This is the best. Like, oh my God, like all this. It's like,
Oh yeah, that's toxic positivity right there. And I'm not making excuses for those kinds of people, because maybe I've leaned into that before in the past as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's also a reaction in and of itself against the critical establishment for not granting those movies that grace, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, knowing
that's how it's
context.
always been. That's how that the Snyder fandom really. It's very difficult to be honest in the Snyder fandom, because there are very dishonest people with no good faith who are criticizing you. And I get that, but I think that, I understand. I do.
No, I understand where you're coming from too. Just as two members of the fandom, and I'm getting deeper because my trajectory, I will be fully honest. I don't want to get too off track here with what we're talking about, but my trajectory with a filmmaker like Zack Snyder is I loved him as a kid. Like, I remember seeing 300 when it first came out. Watchmen was the first R-rated movie I ever saw in theaters. I was way too young to see it at the time. Yeah, I snuck in. I got kicked out. I had to sneak back in again. And then Sucker Punch I didn't see in theaters. But anyway, going on to Man of Steel, I saw that in theaters and I thought it was better than the critical reception made it out to be. But I kind of partook in some of the discussions around, too much mass destruction, yada, yada, yada. And then when BVS came out, I was fully a member of the peanut gallery bashing that movie. And for years, I thought Snyder was a fascist, a hack, all this other stuff. I even met him while thinking this. I worked at a theater in LA at UCLA, and his son, Eli, was a film student there. and was putting on the end of term. They had their short films being premiered at the theater I managed, and Zach and Debbie were there. And this was literally less than 2 weeks after it was publicly announced he was leaving Justice League. And like, I knew the context, but like seeing them in like a family unit, like showing up for their son, and like they were really, they greeted me. I was just the guy like cleaning up after them in the theater, and they went out of their way to say good morning to me, like little things like that. I'm like, oh, this is a good person, like from what my interaction with him at least. And just overhearing conversations they had, like one of the kids lost a bet and Zach was like, you owe me $10. It was just like really cute family stuff that I really appreciated, but still at the time I thought he was a hack. Years went past, and then 2021 rolled around, and I like begrudgingly watched the Snyder Cut because I was like, whatever. I just see what this is about. It's probably going to be some, try hard, edgelord crap. And I saw it, and I wept watching it. I'm mentioning I cry, reading reviews, watching movies, but I literally full on had an emotional reaction to it, and I watched it twice in the weekend of release. Like, watched it on Saturday, watched it on Sunday, a 4-hour plus movie back to back. That's how much like it impacted me. And I felt like that completely changed my perception of him. And that kind of became the launching off point for me, like understanding the role of an artist within this corporate machine. And, like how the media is kind of, I don't know if they're paid or what to kind of.
There's so much venom, and the specificity by which they attack him is I don't know if you can be paid to do that. It's
well, you
very
see the same
disturbing.
thing with Costner. Look at how many Variety articles came out in the last week and a half.
There were like three in a row, and they were all, I couldn't stomach like any one of them, but just the fact that there were that many in a row, like all kind of beating the movie while it's down.
Yeah.
And it felt calculated, and I don't know what is accounting for that or why that is a method of attack. I don't know if it is a bias. I mean, it might be of someone kind of circumventing the system, going outside of the system to create something. I mean, you see this, you're going to see the same stuff when Megalopolis comes out in September. I bet
that one is actually, so the Costner situation and the Zack Snyder situation, I've kind of filed that away as something that I kind of understand. The Coppola one, I don't. But I mean, just tell me what you guys think, because I feel like part of the perception that the media establishment has about Zack Snyder, Kevin Costner, is that they are and or appeal to someone who they dislike philosophically, they dislike socially, politically, or whatever.
But I think even that, to go to your point, that is a narrative that is like, I would think Costner's a conservative. I think that's like, his audience might be comprised somewhat of that, but like, is that actual fact as well? Or is that just supposition? Like, has a census taken?
He was a Republican at one point, but I don't think Costner would fall in line with like groups like the Heritage Foundation or Donald Trump and his cronies.
But he's being painted as that.
Even still, right? I don't think we're talking about art here. I don't think they should be hit piece. That's not right. I mean, that's a principle. I just don't think it's right, Well,
that's also a part of the point I wanted to mention earlier as well. Is like, I feel like a lot of people, these cultural commentators, cursory viewers, they're projecting their politics onto works of art and trying to look for confirmation or denial of their own political belief system. Instead of like, I feel like the work of art itself should be projecting its politics out to you, and then you figure out what that is. Like it's not. I get everyone comes
and then even decide if it matters.
You don't think any side of it matters?
Well, no, I say, and then decide if it matters.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But
yeah, no, I agree.
The whole Coppola thing, I feel like I haven't, and honestly, I'm not the kind of guy who's going to go into like Coppola's, like, see if he has social media and then like go and try to figure out like where he falls in here or there. I do not care,
I don't think he does either.
It's like, having seen all these things take place, you mentioned, Josh, those three filmmakers and the three movies that are kind of getting attacked. The first two seem to be very ideologically one direction, right? Like where it's coming from. That's my perception. So I kind of assume, although I don't know, that that's the situation with Coppola. But I don't know anything about him. And So it's just weird, but.
And I should also mention all three of those works are by like white men. So that also should be taken into account, I mean, but if white men are being attacked like that, I don't know how are other people going to make, creative projects that are their own vision? I don't know. It's just kind of, I think it's a sad state of affairs across the board.
So just to kind of wrap up this whole discussion, what are some lessons that I guess newcomers to this online space should learn from everything that's happened over, I want to say, at least the past 10 years? Mike, I'll start with you.
This is what I'll have to say. I think that you should try your best to enjoy the movies that you watch as much as possible, but not just that. Try to be as open as you can be about whatever you're watching. And what I mean by that is just, I guess I would have to say, engage in it a little bit more. The thing is, a lot of people watch movies to escape. And what escapism means to them is not to escape into someone else's perspective or reality, but just to get out of, to dull, to numb their own reality. So I can escape into a realistic, real life drama of another person. And it could be harrowing. It could be kind of dramatic and whatnot, but I'm still escaping. But a lot of people don't think escapism, that's what it is. They have to, escapism is about feeling good feelings. It's like cinematic anesthetic or anesthesia. I would say just try to be a little bit more present, engage a little bit more, and don't get so entangled into hype, because I think hype also has a drawback in that you can be disappointed and you feel really like bad about it as well. But just experiencing it in the moment, which is what we kind of do anyway. But I would just say be a little bit more self-aware when you're watching your content. And I think that a lot of these problems will be corrected if you do that.
Nice. And Josh, what about you?
To add on to that, lean into emotion more, like embrace your feelings. Engaging with art on an emotional level, I think, is really important. And if it feels like and there's another point I want to make, but you can feel if something feels authentic or not, and if it feels made with conviction or not. And I found a quote of myself that I want to share. I saw it circulating the other day. It's a little harshly put, but Guillermo del Toro said, if you're not operating on an instinctive level, you're not an artist. Reason over emotion is bullshit, absolute bullshit. We suffocate ourselves in rules. I find fantasy liberating. So that kind of just goes off the point I was just making, embracing emotion when it comes to engaging with art and in creating itself. And then also on top of that, I think that something to keep in mind, not just in the past 10 years, but in history in and of itself and moving forward, is that I feel that time always inevitably brings forth the truth about art. Whereas things that are genuine, that are authentic, that are works of art will last and will find an audience if they're made available. That is, that's something that we also have to worry about. Lack of physical media, all that other stuff that would, you could have a whole other podcast about that. But I do think that discourse is temporary. It's of its time. And I think, the work itself exists. Its existence in and of itself is a victory, and time will be kind to it if it's worthwhile work. I feel, I subscribe to that belief. So it's something to keep in mind as well.
I agree.